Okay, hi Jackson.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming. As I've been going through your professional career and your achievement over the past 4 years on LinkedIn and just researching this morning, I more and more realized what an honor it is to have you here today and that you found some time in your busy schedule to come and sit with me and have this interview.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, you launched Black Eats London in 2020 at the back of what happened with George Floyd. You saw that Black-owned restaurants are underrepresented in London, and you started it as a Black-owned restaurant directory with 100 listed businesses. But over the past 4 years, you've reached up to 500 businesses, highlighting Black-owned restaurants and excellence within the hospitality industry in the UK.
Correct. You've done your research.
Yes. You accumulated over £5 million with Black Eats London and attracted over 250,000 attendees with your events. You've worked with companies and festivals like City Splash and Wireless London, and you also have your Black Eats Fest coming up now.
Correct.
What date is it again?
It's September the 14th and 15th.
So we wanted to sit down with you today to find out more about your journey and the story behind your achievement. And if you could just start with where you were born, how you were raised, and you know, kind of a bit about your journey of how you became who you are today.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm 31 now. Just last month, so it's birthday just passed. But I was born in Bristol, southwest of the UK. It's about 2 and a bit hours from London, so it's not too far, but it's not that close. I'm from mixed background, Algerian and Jamaican. I actually lived in Jamaica for 5 years as well during secondary school. I feel like living in Jamaica definitely shaped who I am today. Definitely had a lot of influence on me. And yeah, obviously when you're seeing culture in firsthand, up close on a daily basis for years, you really understand like how important the culture is and how important it is to represent it correctly. And yeah, I moved from Bristol to Birmingham for a year before moving to London about 10 years ago now. So I've been living in London for 10 years. Worked in marketing agencies for about 7 years before, going full time with Black Eats until like now, which is like 4 years on. So yeah, I think living in different cities, living in different countries, seeing things from so many different perspectives kind of like added to the journey of where I am today. And I think the professional career as well obviously had like a massive influence in terms of how I've approached, Black Eats and how we've kind of being able to kind of grow the brand in the space of 4 years.
Yes, wow. It's interesting. I didn't know that you were living in Jamaica when you were a little child. How was that? Do you remember like any like pivotal moments that you experienced in Jamaica where you're like, okay, this is different?
Yeah. I think probably, I moved there when I was 11. So that's like secondary school or high school, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
So that's like a very shaping years in your adulthood or your childhood, should I say. And I think just going to school there was probably the biggest change. Like, in the UK, schools, I don't know, they're crazy environments. Over there, education is probably one of the key things of getting out of your current situation. So whether that's poverty or whether it's, this growth or maybe getting out of the country or being able to kind of, do one step better than maybe your parents were able to do. So education over there is like very important. And it's not a joke. You don't get kids skipping classes like you do over here or like speaking back to the teachers, all that kind of stuff. There's still physical punishment in school, so you ain't acting up. Believe me, you ain't acting up.
Yeah, I mean, not to award like physical punishment, but in terms of like discipline in general and having that importance, it's interesting that so many times people, and I've talked about it on the platform before, so many times people that schooled in African countries or Caribbean countries that come here and the qualifications are not being accredited. When somebody comes back from the Caribbean or from African countries to school here, they're like, what is this? I learned that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So would you definitely say that has being in Caribbean or being in education in Jamaica has definitely contributed to your discipline and to your ways of like doing things today and your professionalism?
Yeah, I think the level of education is much higher because you're surrounded by people who are actually interested in being educated and understand the importance of education. And obviously, when it comes to the discipline, physical or non-physical, it's a lot higher over there. Like, it's not a joke. Like, you're there for a purpose. Some of the parents that are sending their kids to school are making huge sacrifices financially to be able to send their kids to school So you can't be wasting mum and dad's money to be messing around when that's a huge chunk of their salary that you're playing with. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so you're literally the future investment. You're
Exactly.
like, don't play here.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas obviously here it's free, so they don't really see the value, which is, I guess, a topic that we can come on talk about later in terms of valuation of things when it's free versus paid.
How was it with you? Wasn't that difficult for you with 11 though? I mean, you're coming from London. I mean, where you just basically can tell the teacher to F off if you wanted to, and maybe you get a bit of trouble, but it's not the same. Was that like a huge culture shock for you?
Yeah, I think it was like a massive culture shock. I think it probably took a good like 6 months to a year to fully like transition. But definitely I prefer it than like over here. Like,
Oh, really?
if it wasn't for like business, if it was just like enjoyment, I'll be living in Jamaica now. I wouldn't be in this UK.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yes, I get that. I mean, the weather is better. I mean, everything is better. How, I've been literally going through your LinkedIn and looked at all, your professional career. And apart from where you are with Black Eats London now, there's a lot of people that you've worked with, a lot of companies that really speak highly of you.
Yeah.
And you can see like a red thread of like you being super ambitious, but also have a genuine passion for business and scaling up. Can you talk a little bit about that and how there's really like, it's undeniable to see that you've always been really into business and growing business.
Yeah, I think like what's quite different for me compared to like some others is like I've never known really like what I've wanted to do. A lot of things have been quite organic, but I've just been passionate about what I'm doing in the moment. So even when I was like at university, what was I going to do after I left? I wasn't quite sure until I kind of left and kind of put my foot out there and decided, okay, let me do this role that is quite broad and see what I really like within that role and then specialize in that. So I think I've always kind of put myself into uncomfortable situations where I'm not necessarily looking to go that direction or qualified for that, but kind of put myself out there and then kind of, throw myself in the deep end essentially. So I think that's always kind of been a trait of mine, which has enabled me to grow quite quickly. And I think being able to kind of put yourself into situations or into roles where you're maybe underqualified, but you see there's a gap where you can grow, I think has always been like a passion for mine, and always kind of pushing myself and other people to really grow and not be overqualified for roles that you're going into. You see, political people around the world in roles and you're thinking, you don't know what the hell you're doing, but you're still there. So it's like, I think we can take that same approach in all, roles. And I think coming into hospitality as well, and more so the event space. When I was brand new to events, I was looking around and I was like, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Like there's so many industries where from the outside you're thinking, yeah, everyone is like, top of their game, like all that kind of stuff. But then you get inside, you're like, damn, really, this is like, everyone is still finding their feet and kind of winging it essentially. So I feel like, I think there's that kind of fear factor that needs to be crushed before you can truly kind of immerse yourself within the industry.
And do you think like when you look at your early life and your your past, like at your early beginnings, do you think there's this, because not everybody realizes that. There's a lot of people that are like thinking like that and thinking, let me leave that, I'm not there. Is there anything particular, any story or anything that happened in particular in your life that you experienced that actually shifted your mindset to like, nah, actually I'm gonna do this?
I think for me, like when I moved back to the UK, my parents were still living in the Caribbean, so I think there's the part of like, there's no plan B. This needs to be a success. There's no fallback. Like this needs to be a success. So I think that definitely strikes, I don't know, not necessarily like a survival mode, but it's like you're much more aggressive with your approach because I'm not going back to mummy and daddy after this one. Do you know what I mean? There's not that kind of fallback option. So I think that definitely has an impact on like how I approach things, because I'm like, this is going to be a success, whether it's manifesting, whether it's, making sure however you want to kind of position it. I think that definitely has like a massive influence on how I work.
What are your manifestation kind of techniques? I'd love to know a little bit more.
I don't believe in like the I don't want to say the fluffy, but like the whole like, if I just put it out there right on a piece of paper, it's going to happen. Like, not really. Like, I think for me, it's more about like planting the seeds in these industries, in these rooms, in these spaces, connecting with the right people, doing the work, most importantly, doing the work. Like for myself, I've done those, 24-hour shifts. I've worked night shifts. I've done all of the things that people think, oh yeah, Black Eats is all fluffy. You just go to nice restaurants and eat food. Like, it's not that. Like, there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and we've done that work, and I've done that work to get that experience and get that exposure to these different rooms. So I think, yeah, manifestation for me is about, it's more about setting a target and then doing all the things that will help you get to that point. And I feel like for me, there's a thing around like, it's not an if, it's a when. So as long as you do the right things, when the time is right, it will come around.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about your. Now I want to talk a little bit about the turning point of like your initial thought of Black Eats London. We all had this moment, and I remember the moment when I started Melanated Minds, where I was like, idea, and then it was like, I'm gonna do that. So can you tell me a little bit about when you first had the thought and how the journey to like manifestation went for you?
So obviously, like you mentioned at the beginning, it was around kind of George Floyd and like Black Lives Matter movement, which is obviously early in 2020. And for me, it was kind of a thing where I was going to restaurants, I was going to bars, I was going to cafes, I was going to all these places that you see, we talk about now, but there was no central point, there was no directory, there was no Instagram page, there was none of this. It was all up here. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it was like during that period of lockdown, beyond, I guess, Black Lives Matter, more about COVID, there was a kind of influx of support your local businesses, support small businesses, support independents, stop shopping on Amazon, stop shopping with all of these massive companies that are not going to celebrate your order when it comes through. Do you know what I mean? There's small business owners that every single small order, they're like, yes, I'm going to pack this order. I'm going to send a nice little smiley face in the note. I'm going to, be happy and, help them to grow their business and, pay for their child's ballet lessons or send their kid to, I don't know, karate lessons or whatever it is. Those small purchases make a big impact in these small businesses' lives. So I think that was kind of the key switch where I was like, okay, going to all these restaurants is great as an individual. Like I can spend so many hundreds each month myself with restaurants. But if I really want to make a big impact, I need other people to do the same thing. And I think to be able to do that same thing, education needs to be there. If I keep all these restaurants in my head, how's everyone else going to know to go to them? If I know about this great spot in Deptford that we're in right now, and I keep it in my head, how's everyone going to know? So I think creating the directory and having it as a free directory as well, that's like a key thing as well, not having no barriers for people to access it. That was very key. So I think creating the directory and then trying to make it as accessible as possible by adding stuff like, does it have wheelchair access? Is it halal? Do they offer seafood? Do they have, outdoor seating? So all of these different elements that may make someone decide whether something is suitable for them or not, whether it has vegan options, whether it has, I don't know, all these different elements, whether it's Caribbean, African, so on and so forth.
Well organized.
I think, yeah, exactly. So it's just about like being able to compare it to other food or reservation platforms where you can, filter down as to actually what you want, because I don't think it being Black owned should be the reason for you going. I feel like that should be an element potentially, but I think you should actually be going there because you want to go to the restaurant, not just because it's, a Black restaurant. It should be that I'm really feeling to have some saltfish fritters tonight, or I'm really feeling to have some oxtail tonight, or I'm really having some jollof tonight, or whatever that is. And I feel like having that makes it more sustainable long term, rather than it being a socio-economic reason to actually support restaurants. Because especially now, you may have seen compared to 2020, that same support isn't there. Like the things you're seeing going on around the UK right now, which is crazy, 2 months from now, that'll be a thing of the past. It'll be on to the next thing. So I think depending on moments or trends, if you want to call it that, won't last forever. So you need to kind of diversify the offering.
And the value has to be there, and you've been definitely, what you've achieved has definitely shown that the value is provided beyond it just being a Black owned business and us supporting each other. I think we as a people, as a community, really connect with each other through our food. It's one of those things, there's a lot of things within the community we can't put respect on unless the whole world does. But when it comes to our music and when it comes to our food, we don't need anybody to give us any opinion or tell us what's good or not. And I think this is a very strong point in terms of like adding food to the equation. And also what just came into mind thinking about how we often make memes or make jokes about the service in Black owned businesses and in restaurants about, is it the Jamaican shop lady that's unfriendly and says we don't have anything. So when I read on Black Eats, when I read about celebrating Black excellence in the food industry, I thought that was really, really inspiring, and it's so important. And like you said, with the value, actually providing the value, that's something pivotal to celebrate in the community and through Black Eats as well.
For me, like, Black Eats is a network, it's a platform, it's a community. So it's not just about like my personal gains or what Black Eats achieves or Black Eats Fest achieves, but it's about all of the restaurants, all the business owners, everyone involved in the whole thing, that actually, what is it doing for them? So I guess it's like looking at the achievements beyond personal achievements, if that makes sense. So I think for me, doing these events, the whole point of doing them in the first place was to help these businesses to grow. I think doing the event in Hackney for 3 years, or the markets that we were doing in Hackney for 3 years, you know, we provided a massive stepping stone for a lot of businesses that were coming out of lockdown or COVID or whichever you want to call it, where sometimes businesses would have been dark kitchens, they would have been what we call a lockdown baby, where they just came up with it during lockdown. You know, someone might have just, you know, started a skincare brand or whatever it is. And we've been able to provide them with a stepping stone towards bigger and better things. Like Black Eats is not the end, it's not the final, it's not the final step of the journey. But we've had brands that have kind of started with us. Now they have physical restaurants. Now they're stocked in Selfridges. Now they're stocked in Whole Foods. Now they're, you know, all these different places. Because of the revenue we've been able to kind of push into their direction by putting them in a place where sales are guaranteed, because there's that many people, and there's that many people that are intrigued by what they're doing and want to support and want to, you know, try out their products, whether that's food, whether that's drink, whether it's alcohol, whether it's skincare, whether it's hair care, like you name it. Like we have such a variety of brands that work with us, and we really celebrate all types of businesses. It's not just about food and drink.
Do you have like a particular story of a particular business that you're particularly proud of?
So there's one that is literally opening their shop probably by the time this video goes out, and that's a brand called Pure Cane. They're a sugarcane brand owned by a couple, Sangeeta and her partner. And yeah, they've literally been at our events in Hackney since the first event that we ever did there. They followed us to our new space now in Woolwich, and they've been doing festivals with us, you know, around London as well. So they've been on the journey for, you know, the full as long as we have, essentially. And obviously they were around before we were as well. So they've really kind of been a staple in the Black Eats events, essentially. And, you know, they always have one of the longest lines at our events. People love their products. It's almost like a part of the Black Eats experience when you come down to the events. Like, people always get their drinks and they're always like, damn, why is it sold out? Why is the line so big? Actually, next time I come, I'm going to go there first so I can make sure I can get a couple of bottles. Like, it's really like almost like part of the brand now. Do you know what I mean? Yes. And now they're opening their shop in Peckham. So yeah, I'm really proud of their journey. And I think for them as well, understanding their products as well and being able to kind of facilitate that. I think like a lot of consumers, they don't think about, you know, the fragility of stuff with like short shelf life. So stuff like sugarcane, for example, that will expire in a few days. So you need to really think about how you're going to maintain this product. And, you know, that's not something that a customer will even think about when they go to make a purchase. They're just thinking, I just want a drink. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that you really need to figure out as a business owner to make sure something makes financial sense before you start to, you know, make these kind of, you know, investments.
And it's really interesting to hear, you know, you are really working with councils, you're working with like big spaces that are hosting, where you can host your events and things like that. And now you, like I said before, you're working with City Splash, Wireless, you have more plans as to like working with like even football events and things like that. How do you sit on a table with these corporations and with the councils and the government, essentially, you know? How do you do that, literally? Because I find it already quite difficult having my meetings now, and obviously communicating your brand and things like that. I think being able to communicate your brand and sit while sitting on certain tables is like the most important part of the game as well. And can you share a little bit of wisdom, stories, or just the mindset it takes to kind of like be successful in those spaces?
I think for me it kind of comes back to what I said earlier about like going into a space and realizing that everyone hasn't got it figured out. I think a lot of these councils and a lot of these big corporations, the bigger the company, the more legacy systems they have in place, the more processes that they've been doing for tens and tens of years, the more things that they have on physical file. It's not even digital. Like, they haven't transitioned everything yet. So there's a lot of businesses that you see like, oh my God, that's a huge international company, but they still haven't transitioned yet. They haven't, done what is relevant and what is new at the moment. So I think like someone who's on the ground, whether it's a small business, like whoever it is, they'll be doing things that are on trend right now. Those big businesses haven't caught up yet. So I think like you should never be fearful to go into these rooms, because you're the one who knows what's happening on the ground. Do you know what I mean? So I think for us, we move beyond the DEI conversation of like, yeah, we're here for like, black business or whatever. We're here because our stuff is just as good, if not better, than our competitors. That's the kind of conversation we're having. So it's about going into these rooms and saying, you need us, we don't need you. If you want to do what you should be doing, you need to hop on before, we're on to the next one. So I think that's kind of like the position we're in now. Is like, these brands know, like, we went to do a Mayor of London talk back end of last year about London nightlife, and they're telling us, yeah, we're best in class. They're telling us we're doing the best events when it comes to nightlife in London, when you talk about, the overall experience and safety and so on and so forth. So it's like, when we're being asked by Borough Market to tell them about, how to operate things, when we're having, the Mayor of London asking us to do things, we're speaking to Hackney Council and all these other councils about how they should be operating their events. It just goes to show, like, that was when we'd only be operating for 2 years. So if we've been doing it for 2 years, they've been doing it for tens or hundreds of years. Never be like scared to be in these rooms, because the reality is they need you more than you need them.
And you have been endorsed by various brands and large corporations like Vogue, GQ, the Evening Standard. How did all that come to play? What was the journey behind that?
I think with our events, definitely moving into the event space is key for that, because when it comes to events, you're going to have a lot of the public there regardless. When it comes to social media and online things, it's all, tapping on the screen, tapping on the keyboard, that kind of stuff. When it comes to in real life, there's no way that you can avoid it. I think in our time in Hackney, when we had 250,000 people across 3 years, you're going to have someone from one of these magazines turning up. There's going to be someone from one of these magazines who's seeing someone posting something on TikTok or on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever platform it is. So I feel like what we were doing was undeniable back in Hackney. What we are doing now as well. But I think definitely in Hackney, like, having 15,000 people turn up to a back alley in Hackney and it being an event with majority black, demographic, and there being no issues in 3 years is a testament to like what we were doing there. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like by doing that, it was almost undeniable. They couldn't avoid it. They couldn't ignore it.
Yes.
And they had to talk about it. That's how I feel anyway. It all happened very organically. And, when Black Eats was on, everyone knew. You go on your story on Instagram,
somebody's there.
Someone's there.
Yes.
It was just something they couldn't ignore, in my opinion.
And any, challenges within that, or mainly only positive stories?
Not particularly. I feel like when I initially started, like, I was, reaching out to like different like newspapers and outlets and stuff like that. Not much joy, so I kind of just left it, and then it kind of just happened organically. So, and I feel like that's kind of just how things are sometimes. You try to force it, you try to like make it happen, but sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. You just have to sit back and let it happen organically sometimes. So, it's kind of a weird one, but I think traditional mediums like, the newspapers and all that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily what's going to get you the most like coverage nowadays, or going to get you the most views, if you want to call it that. I feel like social media today is the most impactful place you can really put your business out there. Places like Instagram, TikTok, you can get hundreds of thousands of impressions in a few hours. It's going to take someone to buy 100,000 newspapers or read 100,000 newspapers to get that many impressions in a physical paper. So I think, definitely, like I said, people who are on the ground, people who are a little bit younger, understanding these things and using these mediums is where you kind of really get a lot of value without spending, the big money like a lot of these brands do when they get billboards and they're advertising on TFL and all these other mediums, which, if you've got the budget to do it, go ahead. Right, But for smaller brands, spending £100,000 on a outdoor advertising campaign maybe isn't realistic.
And it's like also sometimes a bit of a novelty, really and truly. Like you said, I know it myself running Melanated Minds. You can have a post that goes viral, and I think a poster on a tube won't do that. It won't have the same impact. So definitely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your let's talk about leadership philosophy. What is your wisdom on leadership, and what would you advise other people that want to build their business on, scale up, and achieve their dream goals, basically?
Yeah.
What are your leadership philosophies?
Yeah, I think for me, learning what I did like and what I didn't like when I was working for other people really shaped like how I work with people that I work with. I feel like people definitely do their best work when they're happiest, and I feel like whenever we, organize our own events, we try to create an environment where everyone that's working on the event is happy, they're feeling fulfilled, they're feeling empowered, they're feeling that they're important, they're feeling like they have some influence over, how the event is going to go. So I feel like that's really important, and enabling people to grow as well, not necessarily going and saying, okay, yeah, we need to get the best in class of every single element of this event, but giving people the opportunity to grow into their role and feel like, they're learning and they're getting something outside beyond financial means. Obviously, we pay people well as well. That's obviously very important as well. Yeah. But for me, it's about like leading from the front and really empowering people to do their best work. And often that comes, like I said, when they're happy and when they're put into roles that they actually want to do and they have an interest in.
Yes, and then what would you say are the challenges doing that? I mean, I think, you've had, before Black Eats, you've had leadership positions, and you've been leading teams as well through your journey on LinkedIn and things. So what does it take really to, what are the challenges within that?
Yeah, I think for myself, like I guess before I started Black Eats, I think, I was leading teams from various different backgrounds. I was leading like tech teams, leading like client service teams and so on and so forth. And, when it comes to the tech teams, you're getting a lot of people where maybe English isn't the first language. You're getting people that are very technical in their mindset, and it's, it's a process, and everything is very structured. Then you're having clients that are saying, we want everything by tomorrow, and there's no flexibility. And then you have teams that are getting stressed and all those kind of things. You're managing a lot of different demands and back and forth kind of in that sense. And I think definitely being able to work, with these massive global clients and their projects and their deliverables, and working with teams that are all different shapes and sizes in terms of background, capability, experience, so on and so forth. Onboarding new staff straight out of university, dealing with people that are much older than me and managing them. All of those experiences definitely help shape like how I manage people like today and like now. But I think when it comes to like the events that we do now, we're very key on like employing a lot of like, Black people, obviously. I think when it comes to events and festivals, that's not something that is like an everyday thing. A lot of festivals, it's an extremely white industry. When you look at festivals up and down the country, a lot of the time you'll have people that are working festivals the whole summer. So they'll go from Leeds to Manchester to London to Bristol to Brighton and so on and so forth. They'll do all of the festivals, and that will be one person doing all these different venues. Whereas with us, we really want to kind of encourage Black people to get into the festival space. And obviously the first way to do that is to give them the opportunity. So whether that's the Black Eats Fest, whether that's City Splash, whether that's Wireless or any of the collaborations we're doing, we really want to encourage people to get into the space. And like I said, get in the deep end. But obviously for us, we shadow these people, we help to onboard them, we show them the way, all these different things to try and get them involved, so that this space does become more diverse. Because I think from the organizers' perspectives, they want people that are qualified, they want people that are experienced. But if that opportunity is never given in the first place, how is this going to become a diverse space? It's not. And I'm not a massive fan of like people volunteering and working for free and doing internships, all this stuff. So I think for us, we really want to pay people. That's something that actually makes sense for them, to be able to get them into the door, because it's not necessarily that you're actually going to put yourself into a position where it's not financially viable just to get the experience all the time. No. Sometimes that's what actually will create a barrier to even, starting in the first place.
It's 2024, nobody. Yeah.
You've got bills to pay.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. Wireless, City Splash. I mean, how did you get into that? Like, tell me the story about how did you manage to get these contracts?
Yeah. So City Splash was quite an organic one. The people that we worked with in Hackney are actually the same directors of City Splash. So when we're doing our events in Hackney back in 2020, that was the first year of City Splash in 2020. So the same year we started our events was the same year that City Splash started as well. So back then that was in Beckenham Park, which is, I think it was a 10,000 capacity event. And so that was our first year of curating the food for City Splash. And that was obviously our first year of even doing events full stop. So yeah, we started off with City Splash just as a partnership in 2020. And then in 2021, I actually became a director of City Splash and managed obviously the food and some of the partnerships as well for City Splash. So it actually became like an official thing, if you want to call it that, as becoming a director. So yeah, that was like the first festival that we actually, I guess, collaborated with and now partner with. And then in terms of like Wireless and all these other brands, I think from the experience of doing City Splash and now that festival growing from, 10,000 capacity site to now a 30,000 capacity site, which sells out year on year now. I think the proof is in the pudding. Like we've got festival vendors that can keep up with the demand of 30,000 people that can, do those numbers because doing a wedding or doing a birthday or doing a party where there's 100 people or 150 people, or you're doing deliveries or you're doing a restaurant or whatever, it's a whole different ball game to doing, these festivals where you're going to have these massive lines of people that are staring you in the eye saying, how long's my order going to be? I'm hungry, popcorn's coming on in 20 minutes, so the food needs to be ready. So I think over the past 3-4 years, we've been able to scale these vendors up and get them in a place where they can keep up with the demand. Because when we first started, a lot of these festivals, a lot of the vendors, they weren't representative of the talent that were on the stage. So we'd go to, let's say, for example, Wireless, there may have been 2 or 3 black vendors there, but then you've got Burna Boy on stage, you've got Skepta, you've got all of these black artists, but the food was, chicken and chips and hot dogs and all these kind of things. So for us, it's more about reflecting the stage with the cuisine.
When your business becomes your lifestyle as well, so you're not just growing professionally, you're also growing personally because this becomes you a little bit as well. So how have you grown personally in terms of when you started till now? What do you feel like?
Yeah, definitely it's been a mad journey over the past 4 years. Obviously my professional career spans beyond the 4 years of Black Eats. Obviously I've been working beyond that. I've been working since I was 15. But I feel like this 4 years of being a business owner is very different than being an employee. I feel like when you're an employee, yes, you might have deliverables, you might have homework, you might have things that are on your mind. But when you're a business owner, it goes way beyond that. I feel like there's a lot more, I'm going to say pressure, but it's very hard to, I guess, switch off because, there's always more and more things. But I feel like myself personally, over the last 4 years, my confidence has grown. And I feel like that comes from, the experience. And I feel like sometimes people say oh, you shouldn't need to work that long, or you should be able to just go straight in or get a shortcut and all these kind of things. But I feel like the time you spend in the industry is what really makes it. And people will say oh, if you could go back 4 years, what would you tell yourself now to kind of shortcut? There's not really a shortcut. I feel like for me, the experience is key and the time is key. And all of these mistakes, all of these things that you maybe might not do again, or even these experiences you might be approaching a different way. I feel like that's really what kind of makes you who you are. So I feel like when people say oh, what would you change? I feel like you shouldn't really want to change anything because that really kind of helps you grow as an individual. But I think, understanding your value has definitely been a key thing. And knowing that, like I said, going into these companies and realizing they don't know what they're doing. So it's more about believing in what you're doing and kind of putting your value out there.
Okay, talking about knowing what you're doing, especially as a newer company compared to the older corporations and companies you're working with. What do you think are the industry trends that are coming towards us in the hospitality space, especially?
I think we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of businesses are closing down in terms of physical premises. You're even seeing the likes of Box Parks are closing down. So I think hospitality in general right now is not in the best state. I think there's obviously been the COVID era of, I guess, struggles that has kind of had long-term lasting effects on a lot of businesses now. So I think there are a lot of street food, a lot of pop-up, a lot of, supper club style, I guess, businesses that are popping up right now. I think supper clubs are definitely popping up a lot more than they have been.
Yes.
And I think that comes from the value exchange from the consumer. I feel like people want to experience something a little bit different. They don't want to have the same old every time. And I feel like supper clubs are a great way for, I guess, chefs or business owners to deliver something slightly different while the consumer is actually open to it, rather than it being like a forever rotating menu and that you have no choice over. So yeah, I think it's a great way to experiment both from a consumer and a business owner perspective in terms of supper clubs.
Talking about mental health, I mean, yes, I know it builds confidence, and it doesn't always feel like work, to be fair. But then it's a lot of stress. You have a lot of responsibilities. You're managing a lot of people. Like you said, you have to navigate between all these different levels and versions of pressure. How do you stay mentally sane? And your skin is clear. You clearly you're not too stressed. So how do you stay on top of everything mentally?
I think for me, it's been a journey over the past 4 years and understanding like my bandwidth and the pressure and the stress and managing all of that. And I think even up until last year, we were doing events every single month. Previous to that, we were doing events probably every 2 weeks. So year on year, the event has been reducing in terms of the frequency. And for me, it's two things. One is in terms of like the quality of the events. Being able to obviously spend more time on each event means that we can put more into it. But at the same time, the capacity of myself and obviously putting that onto the event where I might not have a weekend for about 3 months straight because I'm doing all of these events. So I think like being able to kind of create that balance between like personal and work time is definitely been something that I've definitely switched up a lot this year by obviously doing less events and putting more into individual events where as well, the summer is obviously a peak in terms of like the amount of work that we're doing through the summer, and the winter is definitely a lot less. So I think like, of course, in the middle of July or August, you might want to take a 2-week holiday. It's just not possible. But when it comes to November, December, January, we can take that break. So I think it's about like understanding the balance of the year and realizing, okay, there's only 3 months more of summer, then we can take that break. So it's kind of trying to manage the overall calendar year and having that rest in the winter time, but at the same time needing those breaks during the summer as well, because obviously burnout is a real thing. Being worn out is a real thing. And like I said, like people do their best work when they're feeling motivated, they're feeling all of these other emotions. And if you as yourself are not feeling that way, you can't really pour from an empty cup. So I think it's key to take those breaks and, have that break. But sometimes when you're in the moment, it's very hard to do that. You might not see beyond the current situation. So I think that's still a journey that I'm on now. And sometimes it's really hard to say no to certain opportunities or certain things, especially when there's emotions tied to these things, whether it's a charity event or whether it's a cause that you really care about. And, you might not have the capacity to actually do this thing, but, lives are at risk or people are suffering or whatever it is. And you're saying, yeah, I'm going to do it. And you're thinking, God damn, I don't have like a minute to myself, but
okay, so
it is what it is.
All in all, no work-life balance. Let's be honest.
Basically.
No, it's like that. I absolutely get that. And it just, even though you have a team, you delegate and everything, but you can call a spade. When you have a big dream, you're going to have to give all of yourself, really and truly. Maybe we can rest. I mean, they say as you get older, you get to rest, but now we're in our 30s. We can rest when we're in our 40s. I mean, now we have all the energy, isn't it? These young years are for that. It's not going to be when we're 50 we're going to start this. I mean, you can. No ageism here. But I'm just saying it's a good timing to do it like that. Let's talk about legacy and impact. So what is the legacy you want to leave and what is the main impact you want to make with Black Eats London, but obviously your work in general as well? I
think we're already on the journey of the legacy. I think I think the events that we've hosted over the past 4 years have definitely been historic. I feel like what we've done, I don't think it's been seen in the UK before.
No.
So I feel like that legacy has already been planted in terms of a seed, and people definitely already reminisce, even though it was only a couple of years ago that we were doing some of the things that we're doing. And I feel like when you look at the Black hospitality space now versus maybe 5 years ago, it's definitely a lot different. I feel like there's cuisines in the UK that, jerk chicken is probably one of the Black cuisines that is probably the most recognized across the UK. Now jollof rice is almost, global across the UK as a known thing. And there's all these different cuisines across the diaspora where we want them to be normalized. We want them to be household names. We want them to be, I'm going to try that rather than, oh, what's that? That's scary. I've never heard of that before. So I think for us, it's more about normalizing the cuisine and it being an everyday thing. I think when you go onto apps like Deliveroo and Uber Eats and Just Eat and all of these different things, you go through the filters, you see Chinese, Indian, pizza, fish and chips, da 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 da. You scroll down about 30 different categories, then you get to African, then you get to Caribbean. So it's like, why do we need to be the 30th or the 40th thing on the rank? Do you know what I mean? So it's about like normalizing the cuisine to think, no, it should be up there. You know, the food quality is up there.
Yes.
Why is it not?
Yes.
Why is it not up there? So I feel like for us, it's about normalizing it. And yes, we've made some great strides across the past 4 years. When we started, there was only one Black-owned restaurant that was featured in mainstream media. This is from a Vice article, by the way, which was a Black-owned French restaurant in Tufnell Park. It's called Authentique. It's actually a really nice wine bar. But since then, we've seen people like Jockey Abare get Chef of the Year through Time Out. And we've seen Michelin stars awarded this year for Akoko and Shuru as well. So already we can see this change in mentality towards Black food in the UK, but there's definitely a long way to go.
So last but not least, let's talk about your future plans. You have the Black Fest coming up. Tell me a little bit more about what that is going to be about, and past the Black Fest, what's the future plan? Where is Black Eats going?
Yeah, so Black Eats Fest is coming up September 14th, 15th. It's going to be our final Black Eats Fest of the year, so it's our third one of the year. And yeah, like I said, it'll be the final one. And for us, Black Eats Fest, compared to maybe the Black-owned market that we were doing last year, it's about elevation of both the experience and the quality of what we're producing. So for us, like I said, it goes beyond food. It's the whole culture experience. We're going to have food vendors, of course, a lot of different soft drink vendors, cocktail vendors, you know, DJs in the courtyard, as well as in the indoor space, a lot of different activities for people to do. It's split between a family-friendly session and an adult-only session. So there's something for everyone. It's a great experience. And like I said, there's only one more this year. So if you don't come this time, you got to wait till 2025. But in terms of like future, for us, we really, really, really are focused on the quality of what we're actually producing. For us, it's more of a quality over quantity approach. So anything we do beyond this, whether it's across the UK, whether it's across Europe, like the production and the quality of the event and the experience is so important, because we really value what they're investing in their pockets. You know what I mean? If I get you to spend, I don't know, 50, 100 pounds, whatever, I feel like I want you to think, I don't feel no way about that. I feel like I got my money's worth. I feel like I'll do that again. And that kind of comes back from my kind of background of working in CRM and loyalty and understanding the lifetime value of a customer, and that experience that they have in that moment is going to have an influence on if they come return again, or whether they say, that's my last time going to Black Eats Fest because da 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 da. You know what I mean? So for us, the quality of the experience is kind of key in terms of the longevity of having a customer and a consumer, and whether these things are going to be here when our kids are here. You know what I mean? And whether their kids are going to be here. So I feel like the experience is probably the key thing.
Yes, 100%. And I think, like I said before, it's about the value, and really happens often in London that you go and eat out and you're just like, I should have cooked at home. And I think Black Eats London is a hub where that doesn't happen, and where you're just happy to spend the £20 because you want to spend your money on food. You just want to get the value. And I think that's where you're positioning yourself, and in terms of also saying it's over quality, over quantity, that already sets you apart from a lot of food businesses or food vendors, food hubs in general. Quality over quantity. For sure. So thank you so much for coming down and for having this interview. Like I said, for taking the time. You must be very busy. It's summertime as well. That's it really. Is there any last words you want to say? Any wisdom you want to share?
I think for me, it's just like, don't give up, believe in your source, and as long as you believe it, they'll soon believe it too.